I never thought a smile could change everything. I muttered under my breath as I walked toward the backyard where the family had gathered for Memorial Day weekend. The scent of grilled vegetables and burgers filled the air, and laughter bounced lightly off the fences of our suburban home. Emily, my daughter-in-law, was there, as always, radiant and seemingly perfect, greeting everyone with her bright smile and soft voice. Neighbors waved from across the yard, complimenting the spread and praising Emily for how well she had organized everything. I paused for a moment near the table, noting the decorative banner that read, "Family First," the irony of it not lost on me. Plates were filled, kids ran around with water guns, and Ryan, my son, kept adjusting the grill, nodding proudly at Emily's coordination. A comment from our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, cut through the hum of the gathering. "Isn't it wonderful how Emily keeps this family so united?" The words stung, though softly spoken, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I nodded politely, masking the sudden unease, while watching Emily laugh lightly at something Ryan whispered. She was flawless in her demeanor, flawless in her smile, and yet that neighbor's words planted a seed in my mind, a subtle awareness that things might not be exactly as they seemed. I drifted toward the edge of the patio, pretending to check on the lemonade pitcher, but really observing every small interaction. I noticed the way conversations shifted when I entered the circle, how Emily's stories about the family subtly redirected attention, always centering her as the thoughtful orchestrator. It was almost imperceptible, and anyone else might have missed it entirely, but I noticed. That moment lingered as I recalled past barbecues, birthdays, and gatherings that had felt similarly orchestrated, but at the time, I had chalked it up to Emily's natural charm. Today, something clicked, and I realized a pattern emerging over the years, gentle and gradual, but undeniably present. I thought of the old photographs now missing from the mantel, the family heirlooms tucked away, and the stories about past holidays retold without mention of my late husband's involvement. Each tiny alteration, unnoticed by others, painted a picture of control. Emily's perfect smile masked her subtle influence, and while everyone celebrated her graciousness, I was beginning to see the unseen threads she had woven around our family. I continued to move carefully among the tables, offering small refills and nodding to greetings, all the while piecing together the inconsistencies I had glimpsed over the years. The children's laughter echoed in the background, mingling with the soft clink of glasses and the occasional hum of the lawn mower from a neighbor's yard. Emily checked on a young niece, adjusting her dress, her smile never faltering, and I couldn't help but study the perfection of it, knowing now that perfection often concealed a complex design. I thought about Ryan's subtle nods toward Emily, the pride in his gaze, and how even he might not be fully aware of how orchestrated the harmony around him had become. The afternoon light began to soften, casting golden hues across the yard, illuminating Emily's flawless presence and highlighting the careful balance she maintained. In that warm, sunlit backyard, I stood quietly, observing, thinking, and waiting, aware that a discovery of long-hidden truths was quietly forming in my mind, ready to shift the peace of our family forever. The barbecue ended just before sunset, but the feeling that had settled over me remained long after the last car left the driveway. I stood alone in my kitchen rinsing serving bowls while the dishwasher hummed softly in the background. The house felt unusually quiet. For years, I had loved these moments after family gatherings. They always left me with a sense of warmth and gratitude. This time was different. Mrs. Henderson's comment kept replaying in my mind. Emily keeps this family united. At first glance, it sounded like a compliment. Yet the more I thought about it, the more it troubled me. Families are not held together by one person. At least they should not be. The following morning, I found myself walking through the living room with a cup of coffee in hand. Sunlight filtered through the curtains and illuminated the photographs displayed. On the mantel, that was when I noticed something I should have seen months earlier. A photograph from our annual 4th of July picnic was gone. In its place sat a newer picture of Emily, Ryan, and the children taken during a recent vacation. I stared at the empty space in my memory more than the photograph itself. The missing picture had included my late husband, Thomas. He had been standing proudly beside the grill wearing his favorite red baseball cap. For 20 years, that photograph had occupied the center of the mantel. I set down my coffee and looked more closely. Another picture was missing. Then another. Slowly, I walked through the room. The older photographs that told the story of our family seemed fewer than I remembered. Not gone entirely, just reduced, rearranged, pushed toward the edges. That afternoon, I climbed into the attic and opened several storage boxes. I spent hours sorting through albums, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer vacations. As I turned the pages, I noticed something else. The stories attached to many of those memories had changed over time. I remembered family dinners where Thomas spent all day preparing food for everyone. Yet recently I had heard Emily describe those gatherings as traditions she helped establish after joining the family. I remembered organizing annual Easter egg hunts for the grandchildren years before Emily married Ryan. Yet now relatives often referred to them as one of Emily's special traditions. None of these changes had happened suddenly. That was what made them difficult to notice. They had occurred gradually, one small adjustment at a time. By evening, I sat alone at the dining room table with several photo albums spread before me. My fingers traced familiar faces frozen in time. Thomas smiling beside a Christmas tree. Ryan as a teenager helping build a backyard deck. Family reunions filled with cousins, aunts, and uncles. The history was all there. Yet somehow the version being remembered today felt different from the one preserved in those photographs. 2 days later, I attended my granddaughter Lily's elementary school music performance. Parents and grandparents filled the auditorium. After the concert ended, everyone gathered outside near the parking lot. I overheard another parent compliment Emily. "Your family traditions are amazing. The children are lucky you created all those memories for them." Emily smiled graciously and thanked her. Nothing more. She did not correct the statement. She did not mention the generations before her. She simply accepted the praise. I watched quietly from across the sidewalk. For the first time, I noticed how often that happened. Credit flowed naturally toward Emily, while the people who built those traditions faded into the background. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Lily ran over and hugged me. Then she asked a simple question that stopped me cold. "Grandma, is it true Mom started all our family traditions?" I looked down at her innocent face and felt something shift inside me. Because for the first time, I realized the problem was no longer what had been forgotten. The problem was what the next generation was being taught to remember. That evening, back at home, I sat in my favorite armchair near the window, the soft glow of the setting sun reflecting off the polished wooden floor. The quiet of the house was comforting yet deceptive, because my mind refused to rest. The memory of Lily's innocent question lingered, prompting me to reconsider every detail of past family gatherings. I opened the small notebook where I had started keeping track of the changes I noticed. Birthdays without the usual decorations, traditions described differently, photographs that were subtly repositioned or replaced. I realized that Emily had gradually become the center of family narratives without anyone noticing, and this realization both unsettled and fascinated me. As I turned each page of my notebook, patterns emerged. She had never been overtly controlling. Her smile remained perfect, her demeanor impeccable, but she had managed to redirect recognition and appreciation to herself, often with subtle corrections or omissions in conversations. I recalled the 4th of July picnics, the Christmas mornings, the backyard barbecues. Every occasion now filtered through Emily's carefully maintained perspective. That night, I checked my email for messages from relatives and discovered something curious. Several old threads from group emails and chat messages were missing or had been archived without notification. It was not malicious, but it further revealed how the narrative was quietly reshaped over time. The next morning, I found myself scanning old photo albums again, slowly comparing each event, noting who was credited for what. Emily's presence in photos often overshadowed my own contributions or my late husband's role. I felt a mix of sorrow and resolve. This was not about blame. It was about understanding how a seemingly perfect smile could mask subtle influence and change perceptions over time. I poured myself a cup of tea and took the albums to the dining room table, spreading them out as though to invite reflection. Ryan entered, cheerful and unaware of my silent investigation, and commented on how beautiful the photographs looked. I nodded and smiled faintly, hiding the thoughts racing in my mind. As he went about his morning routine, I realized that my observations would require delicate handling. Confronting the subtle orchestration of memories and recognition would not be easy, and it would require patience, tact, and the ability to present facts without creating unnecessary conflict. By midday, I began drafting a plan to gently map out the history of our family events, connecting the photos, the conversations, and the evolving stories. Each dot I connected reinforced the understanding that while Emily's intentions might not be overtly harmful, the outcome had shifted the family's perception over time. I decided to continue documenting everything meticulously, ensuring that the narrative I presented would rely on evidence and allow the family to see the truth themselves. As the sun set again, I closed the albums and felt a strange combination of exhaustion and clarity, knowing that the next step would be sharing these observations in a way that would reveal long-overlooked truths without discord, preparing the stage for a family understanding that was overdue yet necessary. Over the next week, I became increasingly aware of something I had never fully recognized. Before, the exclusions were rarely obvious. Nobody had ever told me I was unwelcome. Nobody had ever openly pushed me aside. Instead, I had been placed behind an invisible wall, one built so gradually that I never noticed it rising. The realization came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was updating my calendar. Ryan called to ask whether I would be attending a soccer game for my grandson that weekend. I immediately agreed, only to discover later that the game had actually taken place the previous Saturday. Ryan sounded genuinely confused when I mentioned the date discrepancy. He insisted Emily had told him she sent me all the details weeks ago. I checked my messages. Nothing. No email. No text. No phone call. Yet this was not the first time something like that had happened. Once I started paying attention, examples appeared everywhere. A family picnic announced after reservations were already made. A school performance I learned about from photographs online. A holiday shopping trip discussed enthusiastically in front of me as though I had chosen not to attend. Each incident seemed small on its own. Together, they formed a troubling pattern. One evening, I sat at my dining room table surrounded by notebooks, calendars, and old family photographs. I began creating a timeline. At first, I expected to find only a few examples. Instead, the list grew rapidly. Birthdays, sporting events, family dinners, weekend trips, celebrations. The dates stretched across years. I highlighted every event where information reached me late or not at all. By midnight, the pages were filled with notes. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the evidence before me. The pattern was undeniable. I had not been accidentally forgotten. I had been gradually moved farther from the center of family life. The following Saturday provided another example. Lily called unexpectedly while I was gardening. During our conversation, she casually mentioned a family outing plan for the following weekend. I knew nothing about it. When I asked where they were going, she immediately stopped talking. A long silence followed. Finally, she said, "I thought Mom already told you." I smiled gently and changed the subject, but my heart sank. Later that evening, Ryan called to discuss the same outing. He seemed surprised that I had not received the information. Again, he assumed someone else had already shared it with me. Again, that assumption had proven false. What troubled me most was not the missed invitation. It was the consistency. Every road seemed to pass through Emily. Information flowed from her to the rest of the family. Plans originated with her. Updates came from her. Decisions were filtered through her. Nobody questioned it because it appeared helpful and organized. Yet that structure gave one person enormous influence over who knew what and when. A few days later, I attended a small birthday dinner for one of my nieces. During the meal, relatives discussed several recent family activities. I listened quietly as they described events I had never heard about. One cousin eventually noticed my silence and asked whether I enjoyed the lake outing from earlier that month. The table became unusually quiet when I explained that I had not known it happened. Several confused glances were exchanged. Emily quickly smiled and explained there must have been a communication mix-up. Everyone accepted the explanation and moved on. Everyone except me. Because I was beginning to understand that communication mix-ups rarely happen dozens of times to the same person. Driving home that night, I felt neither angry nor defeated. I felt focused. The invisible wall was finally visible. And once I could see it clearly, I knew the next discovery would reveal who had been building it all along. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee, watching the soft light filter through the blinds and illuminate the stack of family letters I had organized the previous evening. Each envelope, Each note seemed to hold fragments of the past that had been slowly overshadowed, rewritten, or omitted. I realized that these small documents carried a truth that no photograph or casual conversation could fully capture. Emily had a knack for being present in every story, shaping each memory subtly, but consistently, to center herself. It was not obvious at first. 1. Would notice her smiling face in group photos, her hand gently resting on a grandchild's shoulder, her laugh echoing across the room. But when I looked closer, the moments I remembered creating or organizing were now framed differently. The letters confirmed it. Handwritten notes, old postcards, and reminders from relatives that should have included me now credited Emily's involvement or referenced her as the primary organizer. I turned over another envelope and read a note from my late husband Thomas, praising my efforts in coordinating a summer picnic. Next to it was a printed group message where Emily's contribution was highlighted while mine was omitted entirely. I felt a wave of frustration, tempered by the understanding that this was not meant to humiliate me. It was simply the quiet accumulation of influence over time. Determined, I decided to document everything carefully. For every picture, note, or memory I found, I made a chronological record, marking the contributions of each family member accurately. The more I compared the old documents to current conversations and social media posts, the more patterns emerged. Emily's charm and careful positioning had allowed her to steer recognition without overt confrontation. By afternoon, I had created a detailed timeline spanning nearly a decade, showing how traditions I had started were now credited to her. I took a break and walked into the living room where the sunlight poured across the carpet. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from the backyard, calming my thoughts. I thought about how to approach the situation without creating conflict, realizing that subtle observation and gentle presentation would be necessary. That evening, Ryan called, asking for advice about organizing the grandchildren's next birthday party. I felt a mixture of relief and irony, because he still assumed I was involved as usual, unaware that the historical narrative had been subtly altered over the years. I offered practical suggestions, keeping my tone neutral, careful not to reveal the growing realization of the changes around me. After the call, I returned to my notes and photographs, connecting the dots. Between past and present, I began drafting a plan to show the family the complete story, so that each contribution was recognized fairly. As I laid out albums, letters, and notes side by side, I felt a sense of control returning. The history was intact. The memories were real. And now, with careful effort, the family could see how traditions were truly built, how experiences had been shared, and who had shaped them over the years. In that quiet room, surrounded by decades of family history, I understood that patience, accuracy, and clarity would guide the next steps, ensuring the truth of our family story was preserved for everyone to see and appreciate. By midweek, the weight of observation settled in like the soft afternoon light spilling across my living room. I had spent hours arranging notes, messages, and photographs, tracing a narrative of subtle exclusion woven across years. Each conversation I revisited, each memory I compared, revealed a recurring pattern. Emily's presence had been quietly orchestrated to centralize attention while I was placed on the periphery, unintentionally or otherwise. I could recall moments at family dinners when jokes would circulate that I did not understand because I had not been told about the events referenced. I remembered glimpses of family trips on social media long after they had occurred, leaving me to wonder if I had truly been forgotten or deliberately omitted. I began cataloging each incident with care, making a timeline that stretched over nearly a decade, noting how traditions I had once initiated were now attributed to Emily or described as collaborative when she had been the only visible actor. It was not anger that motivated me, but clarity and the desire to preserve the integrity of family history. On Thursday afternoon, I found myself paging through old letters and a folder of birthday invitations, comparing them to current family group messages. Patterns emerged with startling consistency. Announcements about gatherings, holidays, and milestones were almost always funneled through Emily, ensuring she was the first to know and often the only one credited for organization. The realization was humbling but also empowering. Understanding the structure allowed me to anticipate future occurrences and maintain awareness of the family's true dynamics. Later that evening, I set up a quiet corner with photographs of grandchildren, event programs, and letters in chronological order, cross-referencing them with digital messages. The subtlety of influence was apparent in the smallest details: who was mentioned first, who received acknowledgments, who was included in conversations, and who was left in the background. By carefully assembling these pieces, I created a comprehensive map of interactions, showing the flow of information, the decisions, and the omissions that had accumulated over time. It was meticulous work, but necessary to understand how relationships and recognition had been managed and sometimes redirected. While reviewing my notes, Ryan called to confirm plans for a weekend outing with the children. I answered calmly, providing guidance and input without revealing the depth of my investigation, but inside I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had gained perspective, understanding not just the events themselves, but the subtle choreography behind them. With each documented detail, I could see how the narrative of our family life had been shaped and how I could gently correct misconceptions, ensuring the truth of my contributions and the shared experiences of our family were recognized. As night fell, I looked over the organized documents and photographs, appreciating the clarity that came from this careful observation, understanding that the next step would require patience, tact, and thoughtful communication to preserve relationships while asserting the integrity of memory. Saturday morning brought a gentle quiet over the house, the kind of stillness that makes even familiar walls seem more attentive to one's thoughts. I poured myself a cup of tea and settled into the armchair by the window, the sunlight painting golden patches on the carpet, reflecting off the photographs and letters I had organized over the week. Each piece was a fragment of memory, a testament to moments long past, yet still alive in the details captured within handwriting and smiles frozen in. Images. Emily's presence, though calm and unassuming, had become central in these family records, subtly reframing events that I had once been the steward of. I studied the arrangement, noting how invitations, thank you notes, and holiday cards consistently highlighted her efforts while mine were relegated to background mentions or completely omitted. It was a pattern, clear when laid side by side, not from malice but perhaps from unconscious positioning and charm that commanded attention. Determined to preserve the accuracy of our family history, I began a methodical review, cross-referencing old emails with digital photographs and social media posts. Each confirmation built a comprehensive understanding of how recognition had shifted over the years, revealing the quiet influence of presentation and timing. While tracing these patterns, I reflected on the conversations I had with family members, noting the subtle ways stories were retold, phrases repeated, and memories shared in ways that often centered Emily without intent to exclude. It became a careful exercise in observation, patience, and understanding of human dynamics, rather than confrontation. Later, I moved to the dining area, where sunlight streamed across the table covered with neatly stacked envelopes, scrapbooks, and digital printouts. I sorted, labeled, and created categories that tracked contributions accurately. As I worked, I thought about Ryan calling me for advice about the upcoming family reunion. The phone conversation was casual and polite, but inside, I was acutely aware of the larger narrative unfolding across years. I advised him on scheduling and preparation, making sure the plans respected traditions while gently ensuring my role and previous contributions remained present. After the call, I resumed arranging the documents, noting how each item fit within the broader timeline and family interactions. By evening, the room felt alive with history, each photograph and note a reminder that memory, when observed carefully, could tell the true story of effort and love. I realized that the next steps would require gentle communication, showing family members the full context of past events. Without blame, creating a shared understanding of contributions while maintaining harmony. Sitting back, I allowed myself a quiet smile, recognizing that knowledge and clarity would guide the way forward, allowing the family to honor all experiences accurately and with the dignity each member deserved. By the next morning, the soft light spilling through the windows cast a calm glow over the living room, illuminating the organized stacks of letters and photographs on the coffee table, each representing a piece of the family history I had meticulously reviewed. I could hear the distant hum of the neighborhood awakening, children riding bikes along the quiet street, dogs barking in the distance, and neighbors greeting each other politely, all background to the steady rhythm of my own thoughts. Emily entered the room quietly, holding her morning coffee, her presence measured and calm, and I observed her without judgment, noting how naturally she had integrated herself into the family dynamic. We spoke briefly about the upcoming holiday gathering, discussing seating arrangements, meal planning, and traditions that had been carried on for decades. As she talked, I paid attention to the subtleties in her expressions, the gentle inflections in her voice, and the way she positioned herself in relation to the furniture and photographs, a silent narrative of influence and attentiveness. I responded thoughtfully, carefully affirming traditions that mattered to me while subtly guiding the conversation to include past family contributions, ensuring that our shared history was acknowledged in the plans. After a while, I suggested a small activity to prepare for the gathering, inviting Emily to help organize the family albums in chronological order, which she accepted willingly, showing respect and patience as we worked together. The process allowed me to observe her methodical approach, her attention to detail, and her genuine interest in understanding the family story, while I ensured that all information, from past birthdays to holidays, was accurately reflected in our compilation. As we worked, we shared brief anecdotes, moments of laughter, and small reminiscences that highlighted each family member's personality, allowing for a renewed sense of connection and understanding between us. By midday, the albums were completed, neatly categorized, and ready for display, each page reflecting the care and effort invested over the years. I noted how Emily had learned the family's rhythms and traditions, integrating her own thoughtful touches without overshadowing the contributions of others, creating a balance between continuity and subtle modernization. After a short break, we reviewed the plans for the family reunion again, discussing minor adjustments and reaffirming responsibilities, maintaining a cooperative and calm tone that ensured clarity and mutual respect. The afternoon light shifted as the sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows and a warm hue over the room, and I took a moment to reflect on how careful observation, clear communication, and measured participation could preserve the integrity of family history while allowing new members to contribute meaningfully. I realized that Emily's involvement had the potential to strengthen family bonds, foster understanding, and honor past memories, providing a foundation for events that celebrated both legacy and present connections. As the day progressed, I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the preparation, collaboration, and attention to detail would allow the family to gather with harmony, mutual appreciation, and a clear sense of each individual's place in the shared story. The family reunion arrived on a bright Saturday afternoon in early autumn, and for the first time in many years, I felt completely prepared. The community hall had been decorated with photographs spanning decades, arranged carefully along display boards that followed the timeline I had spent weeks creating. As relatives arrived, they naturally gravitated toward the displays, smiling at familiar faces and pausing to read handwritten captions beneath each photograph. I stood quietly near the entrance, greeting guests and watching their reactions. Cousins pointed out forgotten vacations. Grandchildren laughed at pictures of their parents as children. Aunts and uncles shared stories that had not been told in years. What struck me most was how often people stopped and said the same thing. "I forgot you organized this." I did not realize Thomas started that tradition. I had no idea this went back that far. There was no accusation in their voices, only surprise. Throughout the afternoon, the displays became the center of attention. The timeline connected birthdays, holidays, family trips, and community events, showing how each tradition had evolved over time and how many different people had contributed to building our family culture. Emily spent nearly an hour examining the photographs and notes. Several times, relatives approached her and asked questions about events she had not attended because they occurred before she joined the family. To her credit, she answered honestly. When she did not know something, she directed them toward me. It was a small change, but I noticed it. Ryan noticed it too. Later, he walked through the displays slowly, reading every caption. I watched him stop in front of a photograph showing Thomas teaching him how to build a treehouse when he was 12 years old. Beneath the picture was a short description written from an old family journal. Ryan stood there for a long time. When he finally approached me, his expression was thoughtful. "I think I forgot how much work you and Dad put into all of this," he said quietly. I smiled. Life gets busy. He nodded, but did not look away. Still, I should have paid more attention. It was not a dramatic apology. It did not need to be. Sometimes a simple acknowledgement carries more weight than a speech. As the afternoon continued, conversations shifted naturally. Relatives shared memories that included people who had been overlooked. Older stories resurfaced. Contributions were recognized. The family narrative became broader, more complete, and more accurate. No one person occupied the center anymore. Instead, everyone had a place. As the sun began to set, the golden light streamed through the hall windows and illuminated the photographs one final time. Looking around the room, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The truth had not damaged the family. It had strengthened it. Not because anyone was exposed or embarrassed, but because everyone could finally see the full picture. Emily approached me before leaving and glanced at the displays once more. "You preserved a lot of history," she said softly. "Someone needed to," I replied. She nodded in agreement. There was no tension in the moment, only understanding. By the time the last guest departed and the hall grew quiet, I realized something important. The peace our family needed had never depended on one person controlling the story. Real peace came from honesty, memory, and respect for everyone who helped build the life we shared. As I packed away the photographs and carefully closed the final album, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past had been remembered correctly. The present felt clearer, and the future, for the first time in a very long while, seemed wide open.